Hello, my name is Sonny and this is my presentation on oil. Thank you. Hydrocarbons have fueled innovation and discovery for the last 150 years. And even though it has shaped our modern world, very few know how oil and coal formed, how they became a staple, and how we use them today. This presentation will inform you on the history and use of hydrocarbons, and give insight on how a sustainable world with oil could work. Chapter 1. 256 million years ago. 256 million years ago, around the same time Pangaea was formed, or Pangaea, most of Earth's petroleum reservoirs were beginning to develop as well. Contrary to the common misconception that coal and oil are made out of dead dinosaurs, both are almost entirely formed out of dead plant microorganisms, such as seaweed and algae. After millions of years, the organic matter is slowly compressed by layers of sediment and rock into crude oil. Oil exclusively forms in oceans, while coal almost exclusively forms in peat bogs. Depending on what organic matter is made into oil and the amount of heat supplied, it may be of varying quality. The ways of determining quality, and ultimately price, are viscosity, heavy and light, and sulfur impurities, sweet and sour. Brent oil, named after the now dried up Brent deposit off the coast of England, is a relative term that is used for the best of the best oil. This is a map showing Earth's major oil reserves and their quality. The legend is in the bottom left. Chapter 2. Beginning of the Oil Rush. Now we will look at some examples of modern-day oil discovery and the beginning of the oil rush. We start in China. The first ever recorded oil discovery was 2,000 years ago in China, where they would use it as medicine, but just 300 years later they had found that it was burnable. In 347 AD, the Chinese were drilling oil wells with drill bits attached to bamboo poles, and these oil wells were sometimes a mind-boggling 800 feet deep, just bamboo poles. The main use for the crude was to evaporate salt from water, and so there were bamboo pipelines built that ran from the oil wells to the ocean in order to carry the oil. Now we will look at the discovery of paraffin ore. In 1847, in Riddings coal mine in Atherton, Derbyshire, the mine began slowly flooding with oil, and a Scottish chemist named James Young was able to distill the crude in a very basic way. The product of this experiment was low-quality paraffin oil and low-grade lubricant. Then, after the oil pool was dry, Young noticed that the oil was slowly dripping from the sandstone roof of the mine, and he theorized that the oil was being brought out of the coal by heat. So he did several tests until he had success. What he did was take cannel coal, and by slowly heating it, coal oil would seep out. The reason why this was possible in the first place is because oil and coal form in a very similar way, as we just saw. But because coal oil has impurities from coal, it is super low quality, and it's more efficient to just burn the coal. Next is the inventor of the kerosene lamp. Another notable discovery of crude oil was by the Polish pharmacist Ignacy Lukowicz. Lukowicz had been doing experiments with his colleagues on crude oil, and what they would do was purify the oil and sell it as medicine for skin diseases. diseases. This worked for a while, but because it was expensive, they didn't get many sales. In 1854, Lukowicz set up an oil mine in Poland, and because he was doing work on a new paraffin lamp, he had a use for crude. He also made the first ever industrial hydrocarbon refinery to mass produce the paraffin oil. Lukowicz's lamp gave oil its first big purpose. For humans have been using animal fats for tens of thousands of years to illuminate, and in the 1900s, whale oil was getting costly. So when the paraffin lamp became widespread, everyone was hooked. And in a big way, Ignacy Lukowicz started the oil rush. The oil mine that Lukowicz had built 170 years ago is still around today, pumping black gold out of the ground. Now we go to someone who got America hooked on oil. Someone who made paraffin oil available and widespread in America was Abraham Genizer. Genizer was Canadian and lived in St. John for most of his life, but he didn't find success in Canada. After his father died in 1856, he moved himself and his family to New York, where he created the North American Kerosene Company. This business had great success, and its factory could go through 30,000 tons of coal a year, and they could make 5,000 gallons of kerosene a day. They were making coal oil. Unfortunately, they were bought out by Standard Oil, and later the refinery was sold for scrap in the 1950s. Finally, the first oil well in America. The most known example of a modern-day oil well was in 1859 in Tutsville, Pennsylvania. The oil well, drilled by Edwin Drake, used a steam engine, and at a depth of 69 feet, he struck oil. In the following months, Tutsville went from being a few shacks to a bustling city with over 50,000 people. But as more oil was pumped above ground, the deposit slowly dried up, and in 1880, Edwin Drake died penniless. Chapter 3. Drilling, Distillation, and Disasters. Oil has played many roles in our society, so let's learn about the drilling, distillation, and disasters that oil causes and has. Around 100 years ago, when conventional oil reserves were abundant, geologists and geophysicists would locate a deposit by using seismic tests. These tests sometimes consisted of causing an underground explosion and viewing the seismic response. But less violent modern substitutes also work. Then once an oil field is located, a hole is drilled up to 1,300 feet in the ground until the deposit is tapped, and a steel pipe is inserted to stop the hole from collapsing. During the drilling process, a viscous, heavy green liquid called drilling mud is poured into the well. This is because the oil deposit already has immense pressure on it from the surrounding rock, and oil and natural gas want to escape. This wouldn't be a problem if natural gas was an explosive, toxic, and a pollutant. So the drilling mud acts as a stopper by putting enough pressure on the natural gas and oil to stop it from bubbling up while drilling. Then, after the well is done, a pump jack is attached to the top of the pipe to pump the oil above ground and limit the flow. Offshore drilling is almost the same as onshore drilling, except the oil well is on a platform above the water, and the natural gas that comes out of the well is not saved, but immediately burned. Now that most large oil pockets have been drained, companies have developed new technology to extract oil. Fracking, or hydraulic fracking, is when high-pressure fluids are pumped into a pipe with small holes in the sides. The liquid then creates cracks in the rock for the holes, and any small amounts of oil stuck in the ground seeps through the cracks and is pumped up the pipe. The issue is that the liquid that fracking uses is full of dangerous chemicals, and if any leaks in the underground waterways, it can kill entire towns. Next is the distillation process. Crude oil can be distilled into a wide range of petroleum fuels and plastics. Refineries heat crude oil up until it becomes a vapor. In the vapor, there are multiple different hydrocarbons. Once the vapor condenses, the different fuels will float at different levels, where they are individually pumped out. Finally, disasters. In the mid-1900s in Ecuador, their vast oil fields belonged to Texaco Inc. Belonged to Texaco Inc. through 1964 to 1996. In this time, they extracted and refined billions of dollars of crude, but while oil was being extracted for fracking, they produced a toxic water byproduct. Instead of properly disposing of the millions of liters of fracking water they had acquired, they decided it was cheaper to pour the toxin into the rainforest. At the time, there was a couple million people living in the pristine Ecuadorian jungle, but now there was poison being pumped into their water supply. In the end, Texaco Inc. was responsible for 300,000 people dying, and to this day they still haven't paid a cent. In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, owned by BP, British Petroleum, was drilling in the Gulf of Mexico when it blew up. It was the biggest man-made disaster ever, spilling 134 million gallons of crude into the Gulf. The reason why it blew up was that while the well was being drilled, they miscalculated how much drilling mud they would need to overcome the pressure of the oil deposit, and natural gas ended up leaking. With how volatile natural gas is, it only took a single spark to cause the gas to rapidly combust, thus setting the rig ablaze. Now, how would a sustainable world with oil work? The oil industry has very little competition, being primarily dominated by Chevron, Shell, ExxonMobil, and BP. These companies buy oil rights in developing countries for ludicrously cheap, and continue to extract all the oil with very little regard for the land. Example, 1960s Chevron. Now, if the oil was owned by the nation, they would definitely try to keep their country beautiful. And because they don't care as much about profit margins as industrial giants do, most petroleum-based goods would lower in price. Unfortunately, nationalizing commonly leads to mismanagement and corruption, as people in power are put in charge of these industries even though they don't know how to run them. Currently, finding a way to extract and use oil with no one hurting is beyond difficult. In the end, a world with oil is possible, but I think we should use this finite resource for plastics and rubber instead as a primary energy source. Thank you. My name is Sonny Bell.